Elie Wiesel was a prolific Holocaust survivor. Now, he wasn't renowned just because he survived the Holocaust, but because through that terrible experience, he found and shared a deep personal transformation by fostering hope in the most hopeless of situations. Now, he is such an inspirational man, has published number of books, met presidents, spoken to vast crowds of people, and has inspired people because of this deep sense of gratitude. When, in a moment when he could have completely tanked in hope and fear and despair, he was uplifted by finding glimmers of God all around him. For example, one day he was receiving his meal at the concentration camp. It turned out to be a measly cup of rice. And looking at it, he mumbled, "This is it?" As a response, the guard slapped it out of his hands, and he had no meal to eat that day. Now, in that circumstance, most people would walk away with their head down, lamenting and angry because of that lack of food. However, Wiesel had a different reaction. He looked at his rice on the ground and said, "Well, looks like today I'm going to be fasting." So in a moment prone to anger and sadness, he turned it into an opportunity of sacrificial prayer, of intentional gratitude. And this is why we remember Elie Wiesel. He says, "Gratitude is a word that I cherish. Gratitude is what defines the happiness and humanity of the human being." For Wiesel, gratitude was not just a nice, good feeling type of word. It was at the depth of what it means to flourish and to thrive as a human being. Like Elie Wiesel, Paul had a similar outlook. He was persecuted, beaten, and at the time that he wrote this letter that we read today, he was chained. He was literally penning a note with chains on his hands. But in that letter, we don't read about him complaining about the terrible situation. He wasn't saying, this is such a brutal situation. Why am I here? Why are they putting me through this? Instead, while he's imprisoned, while he's probably malnourished and persecuted, he rejoices in the cross of Jesus Christ. And so, similarly, Paul has this beautiful sense of gratitude that with hundreds of things to complain about, he rejoices in the depth of his faith. He knows that there's nothing better than Christ saving us. And anything that we want to complain about pales in comparison. Now, unlike Wiesel and St. Paul, we are often a little less grateful, to the point that we just take for granted a lot of the blessings that God grants us. You know, great food that we encounter every day, a warm bed, a functioning car with heaters, and friends and family around us that show us appreciation. And amidst all of these blessings, we somehow find ways to complain. We find the little things, the spilt milk in a luxurious home. And so instead of rejoicing in all the blessings that we have, we can often allow the cancer of negativity to eat away at the hope and the joy of God. And so we end up complaining rather than rejoicing. In our gospel, we can find ourselves similar to the 9 lepers who did not come back to Christ. In a lot of ways, especially I myself find that I walk away from the gifts of God without truly appreciating the giver of these gifts and the gift itself that comes from the Lord. For example, this week I had some car issues, so I thought I would drop it off and within a day pick it up with no problem. It turned into a 3-day fiasco where I had to find rides back here to the rectory. I finagled borrowing a car from the seminary. And in this, annoying situation, I had 2 options. Number 1, I could complain and pout. And number 2, I could dwell in all the blessings around me, which surrounded that one bad situation. And I found it difficult to do that. It was way more easy to vent to people about how the mechanics didn't know what they were doing, how my life is so much more difficult. But the moments that I did stop and rejoice in the people around me who were being charitable, in the slower pace of life that I got to appreciate, the more I got to really be uplifted by this bad situation. So for us, how do we foster this grateful spirit that we see in our readings and in the lives of the holy people around us? The most fundamental way that we could do this is to make prayer of thanks a habit. Make this a daily and even constant habit. So in the end of the beginning of our day, we can engage in a prayer called the Examen from St. Ignatius of Loyola. Now in this prayer, a key component is counting all the ways that God has blessed you throughout the previous 24 hours. Now this is fundamental because it is only in recognizing all the blessings that God has given us that we can truly examine the grace of our lives and how we can move forward. And along with this, in recognizing these blessings, we can see how the faults that we've made, the sins that we've committed, have kept us from seeing God's hand in our lives. And in making this daily act of thanks to the Lord, recognizing the goodness around us, we start forming a whole new mindset. Rather than one that's quick to complain and that's always seeking towards the negative side, we look around and only see the goodness of God filling our lives. And so especially on the Sunday as we rejoice in this Eucharist, this feast of Thanksgiving, it is a special reminder for us to delight in all that God has offered us in order to dispel the negative spirit, keeping us from celebrating the blessings that God has given our lives with our whole heart.